So for our first panel, I'm delighted to have with me Holly Dorber from PayPal, Risa Cristanto from Monai, and Diane Chondronegro from Griffith University. And if I've pronounced anyone's name wrong, I'm very sorry. And so we'll be discussing today sort of like a first part of the hypothesis here, that regulation frameworks like fraud, AML, and CTF slow down and sometimes prevent regulated organizations from conducting cross-border trade with MSMEs. So to kick us off, it would be great to just hear a sentence from each of you on your relationship to this topic. Could start with you, Holly, and then go Risa and Deanne.
Great. Thank you so much, Harriet, and thank you to everybody for having me here today. I think in a sentence, what is my relationship to this topic? In my day job, I work for PayPal, look after government relations and public policy, but have also recently taken on the role of president of the Australian Services Roundtable. And it's really in that capacity that I think there's the most relevance to this conversation. We look very much at services trade and establishing consistent global digital trade rules throughout APAC, but also globally. And one of the big issues that we face when we're thinking about trade rules and cross-border trade, which is really just another word for commerce across borders, is how do we encourage greater participation and inclusion of micro, small and medium enterprises, and how do regulatory frameworks which exist for the purpose of protecting the safety, security and confidence in the financial system sometimes impede inclusion for MSMEs. And so that's the sort of angle that I'm coming at today for my participation. So thanks for having me and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. Again, thank you and morning, everyone. So I think in one of the also important aspects that need to cover will be, how we can build some, robust and comprehensive KYC and how we're going to use the alternative data to, speed up all the process, build more trustable information, and also, how we can build some best tool in terms of transaction monitoring, between the market, and also not to mention the technology and innovation that can help to, build more effective and fast process and also very efficient way, again, to support all these cross-border trade, especially for the SME market. So I think those areas will be one of the key areas that we also need to cover during the discussion. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. I'd like just to follow from Holly and Risa about the use of technology. So I research and teach in the area of AI, especially the use of responsible AI and the appropriate data governance to make sure that we can do innovation within and outside of single organizations. Given the challenge, I suppose, with the complexities to navigate through the AML and CFT regulations, for example, to do cross-border trade, there is an opportunity for AI, especially the use of machine learning and advanced analytics, to be a powerful tools to address these challenges around efficiency and the accuracy for compliance. Last but not least, I think I'd like to highlight that AI can potentially help with regards to navigating the complexity to do cross-border trade while maintaining the integrity at the same time. So, for example, by doing some predictions as well as detections and finding important opportunities where we can support the participation for all MSMEs in the global economy. Thank you.
Great, thanks all. Some very different perspectives as well. So to start sort of getting into this hypothesis, it'd be great to get a sense of what these barriers to trade can look like in practice. So Risa, is this something which you have experienced in Indonesia? And if so, what are some of the implications of limiting cross-border trade with MSMEs in your experience?
Yeah, so I think I'll give you one example. Recently we also see, in terms of business information, like in case there's a foreign company who would like to do some business with, local company, they need to find some reliable, business information company who can provide comprehensive report. And so currently it takes like 5 to 7 days, and all the process is still manual. So I think some of the challenges, I think we need to focus on. The first one is the comprehensive KYC. How we can build some digital identity, across the market or across the region. But again, sometimes the challenge in the regulation is, we're not trying to build some stringent QIC process that again it's going to slowing down. But again, how we can have this common regulation, because we see some of the challenges. I'll give you an example that, for example, like in Philippines, right? The national ID is not standardized, which is quite different with Indonesia at the moment, and that's why how we use the alternative data, like the telco score will be more stronger than the other information. There is still some challenges in the market, how we can do some common regulation to have a better tools to do some robust and also comprehensive QIC. And not to mention also the recession monitoring, because one, we're trying to grow this cross-border trade within SME. There's also open some challenges in terms of how we can, some monitoring on the fraud and also the CFT within the region. So I think those are some of the challenges. But I think Indonesia, we've done some good work. I think the government, they impose a lot of new regulation in terms of data privacy, and I think the role of a credit bureau and also alternative data company in Indonesia has been supporting, a lot of progress in terms of providing the standardized information, and also, build some trustable company who can provide some easy access to some of the foreign company for doing business in Indonesia.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So it really is the importance of getting that standardized information. It's sort of the key role.
Yeah, can you imagine if you can speed up process from, so currently like 5 to 7 days, within like 30 minutes, I think that will be major changing, if we can speed up and give some trustable and fast process, especially to validating some of the SME within the region.
Yeah, thank you. And so, Diane, you've done a lot of work looking at the flow of information between organizations, and when we're hearing from Risa there, like that it takes a long time and too long for that information to flow. But what are some of the real challenges faced in providing the required information across borders to meet regulatory frameworks like AML, CTF?
Thanks, Harriet. Obviously, the key here is what we talked about earlier, is about this monitoring, right? And the whole notion about if we already standardize the flow of information and infrastructure for data provision, then the next thing is obviously how to speed up the process. Essentially, what Risa said is about the checking. So potentially through the use of standardized data as well as the machine learning techniques, we can look at ways of which we can do automation of the monitoring, also reduce the false positives, essentially, right? So what we don't want is to process unnecessary potential things to look at. And importantly, AI is capable of enhancing this data sharing and interoperability, because it can harmonize various standards. So if you imagine it, we have the AML CFT compliance requirements across different regulations across the different borders. I think it will be very important to support it in a way that is to do with shared data in a secure way. So one technique is, for example, we can do federated analytics. So we are looking at ways of which we can do centralized data analytics without necessarily transferring private and confidential information from the sources itself. So AI can also help us to extract only the necessary information needed for checking transactions, so to speak, rather than unnecessarily deploying as well as transferring private and sensitive information.
So there are specific challenges there related to consent and privacy, would you say, which need to be overcome?
And because of that, AI is enabling, because not everything that can be checked by the users and the end users and the consumers, so to speak. So it's very important that we enable AI as almost like a proxy to enable this sort of protection of consumer information, most importantly, and also some of the unnecessary information. Keep on saying unnecessary because there's this customer due diligence as well as know your consumer kind of processes, right, needed. But beyond that, I think we should not disclose or transfer information unnecessarily.
Yeah, great. And Holly, I'm keen to bring you in as well. And kind of coming back to our hypothesis a bit, like, what is it about the regulatory frameworks that makes it so hard to conduct trade? Because it's not just a case of sharing data from A to B, is it?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, even just listening to the introductory remarks from the workshop this morning. We typically tend to think, certainly in our payments world, we think about open data very much in the context of open banking. But actually what we're talking about is a much broader movement of information, and in this case specifically, movement of data across border, which is obviously very fraught. But necessarily when we're thinking about open banking and open finance now, we tend just to think about the frameworks governing the movement of that data. But actually in the context of the hypothesis that we're discussing, it actually touches on so many areas of really hot topic public policy regulatory development at the moment. So Diane was just talking about AI. How does AI policy development play out in this space? We've mentioned privacy, we've mentioned digital identity, cybersecurity is another one. Obviously, AML-CTF frameworks are also critical. And I think the interesting challenge here is that everybody agrees all of those are absolutely critical frameworks that need to exist and operate well in a global economy, because the very purpose that they serve is to prevent bad actors from corrupting the economic activity in the global economy. But then how we think about that in terms of open data really comes back to then the quality and the reliability and the trustworthiness of the open data frameworks, and the data that's being inputted into the system itself really matter and really become the things that are the most important criteria in designing these frameworks, because of the outcomes that they're seeking to regulate. And I think, speaking from an Australian perspective, and I'm sure there's similar experiences in these frameworks around the world, one of the biggest hurdles to the take-up of open banking or consumer data right as we have in Australia really is the reliability of the data that's going in. And so I think starting to think, have a conversation more around what data sets exist and they are therefore comparable and therefore portable in different markets across border that can help address some of these quality and reliability issues, leading to greater trust, which will help SMEs, MSMEs, access the global economy across border. With there are enough challenges around individual identity issues and AML. But then when we take that even further to MSME identification frameworks, which are primarily, I might just ask, yeah, thank you, just on mute. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought, but it's even more challenging for MSMEs in many ways to participate in the global economy. And a lot of that is due to the regulatory frameworks that apply to larger entities that are looking to support them in doing business. And so issues around debanking are well documented throughout the region. And that typically will affect, it can typically affect the financial inclusion of MSMEs in growing markets. And so I think the conversation around a much broader concept of open data is really valuable, because you're never going to get harmonization. It's never going to be perfectly the same in every market, but where you can go towards alignment and agree that we have
QR code on the screen.
we can get more closely aligned in these different frameworks, where you can say, well, this is equivalent to this, and so we can build a framework which says in this market, if we've achieved this level of confidence in the data, it can be accepted across border and streamline everything. Because obviously the biggest challenge for MSMEs, if they're exporting or trading with multiple markets, is trying to get their heads around each of the regulatory requirements in those markets. So the more streamlined and simplified we can make it through the use of emerging technology, the better for participation.
Yeah, I think that the importance of sort of the data quality is a really good point to draw out. And you said at the start, Holly, around from your experience at PayPal that this is a gap that you can see, and what do you think are the costs to society of not reducing this friction for MSMEs?
Yeah, so I definitely think this is something we see particularly in the context of the Australian Services Roundtable. And when you think about, I mean, the whole world of trade is something that I think not a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about. Multilateral negotiations around trade agreements might put a lot of people to sleep, but actually there is a lot of excellent work happening as we speak around designing digital trade rules that will govern things like this and help. And the specific purpose is, how do you balance, obviously, the need to have domestic frameworks which protect citizens in their markets with open and free trade, which benefits communities, including small and medium enterprises. And so the barriers that we see in this space particularly is, like I said before, the fragmentation of regulatory obligations and the challenges with, trying to do business in multiple markets, where we're seeing almost in every case more, not less, regulation governing the movement of data across borders is obviously a big part of that. And as I said, it's critical in the context of our hypothesis. But how do we get towards harmonization and not sort of towards regulatory arbitrage, where each different market is trying to win in this space, which creates fragmentation and multiple different obligations that make it challenging for MSMEs to participate, but also for larger businesses that are servicing MSMEs? How do you ensure you're making it easier for them also to do business with MSMEs to access the global market?
Yeah, of course. And I might just open up there in case Risa and Deanne, you wanted to follow that up with any additional comments.
Thanks, Harriet.
Yeah,
sorry, Risa.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, brother.
Thank you. I just like to briefly mention, this quality of data is very critical, isn't it? In making sure that we got what we can extract from the vast amount of transactional data, as well as the static data. So in that sense, is to make sure that we can select the important data based on patterns and previous lesson learnings in that sense. So that's why I was just going to highlight that that is why open data is so important for us, because we need to standardize the way that this data is represented and structured. Okay.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with Holly, and just to add some, because I think a few years back also, part of the working group team who discussed on the cross-border report for the Credit Bureau. I mean, this is also now happens on the payment landscape, while on top of how we can have this common regulation on open data between regions, but also in terms of regulatory point of view, how their willingness to open and trying to do some initiative on this open data between region. Because again, the initiatives not only build some trustable and reliable information, but also to reduce some costs and speed up the SLA, because definitely it can bring a lot of value, especially for the foreign company to do some cross-border trade, and specifically for MSME, because typically, I mean, we don't also, open data is good, but a lot of data can be also related with costs, this is something we need to balance. Typically, the financial institution or the MSME, they need some, good reliable information, but also in terms of cost, you need to support on this initiative, because typically this company will be considered as a company who also cost sensitive in terms of growing the business between region.